Welcome to the 700 Club. I want you to walk with me back in history. Your host here is almost 90 years old, and I can remember the time that Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of Israel, held up documents after he had met with Adolf Hitler, and he said, "We have peace in our time." There he is. Well, George Santayana said, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." In 1938, British Prime Minister, after getting promises from Hitler, comes back and he says, "There is peace in our time." He's holding up the papers right there, and he was then re-elected to Prime Ministership of England. But what happened in that year? When he met with Hitler in Munich, Hitler said, "Look, the Sudetendeutsch are being oppressed by the Czechs, and we demand sovereignty over the Sudetenland." And Chamberlain said, "Okay, what's it going to be for me?" And Hitler said, "I will not engage in any more war. Just give me that and disband the Czech army." The Czech army was the most powerful in Europe. And we went along, at least the Chamberlain went along, with dismembering or disbanding the Czech army, giving up the Sudetenland, a little strip of territory, so that Hitler could move into it. All right, all that went on. And then within a year of signing that agreement, Germany invaded Poland and World War II was underway. But ladies and gentlemen, as I look what's happening with the Kurds in the Middle East, it is a replay almost word for word. The President of the United States comes on the air and he said, "I have a peace treaty with Erdogan." But Erdogan said, "I need a strip of land. And you give me the strip of land and then I won't invade anymore." But now there has been brutality against the Christians, the Yazidis, and the Kurds. And the Kurds had the best army to defend for freedom in the Middle East, and we have allowed it to be disbanded, just like happened in Czechoslovakia, exactly the same thing. And the president has come and said, "Well, Erdogan seems to be a nice person. He seems to love his country." Erdogan destroyed or killed the leaders of the military, the leaders of the parliament, and has wanted to make that nation, Turkey, a Muslim state. And yet we're saying we're going to trust him because we have now done exactly what Chamberlain did in Czechoslovakia. The Turks said, "Well, just give us a piece of Syria and we'll take care of cleansing that, and then we won't bother anymore." And ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you right now, as I sit here, history will repeat itself. Chamberlain went on to a victory in England in the election, and 1 year from the time of Munich, Germany invaded Poland and World War II was underway. The Kurds, we have abandoned them. They're being slaughtered by the Turks, and we have given a major port of Syria. And I promise you, as I'm sitting here right now, Russia is going to come against us. Turkey is going to come against us. China is going to come against us. North Korea is going to come against us. And I suppose the Syrians will come. I mean,
so what recourse do we have at this point?
Well, it's almost too late because
it's been done.
It's like the President of the United States is modeling Neville Chamberlain, and we've already had our Munich where we have surrendered territory to a wicked dictator and have given over the best army in the Middle East, has been disbanded. And it's a shocking testimony. But ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, Chamberlain went ahead to be reelected. I think that nobody's going to impeach the president, and there's going to be, he will win the 2020 election. I think he will win if history bears out the same. Chamberlain was reelected, but within a few months after that election, the Russians are going to come against us, the Chinese are going to come against us, the North Koreans are going to come against us, the Turks are going to come against us, and we will be in a position to fight for our lives. And we will not be able to do it because we don't have enough Navy, we don't have enough support, and all of our enclaves of troops. It's just what happened to the British once the onslaught of Hitler forces came sweeping over the Low Countries. They had men, the British Expeditionary Forces, were trapped in a place called Dunkirk, and there were 300,000 of them that were evacuated by all kinds of craft that came over the sea from England and brought them out, 300,000. But they were overwhelmed. And so we have some tripwires in Europe, tripwires. We have tripwire in between North and South Korea. We have a tiny, tiny tripwire on the border of Turkey. And those forces will be overrun. And mark my word, listen, you've heard it on this program, within a year or more after the election, we're going to be struggling for our life. Decisions have consequences. And once again, those who will not heed the lesson of history are doomed to live it again. And it's a playbook almost identical to what happened with Chamberlain and the Nazis under Hitler. Well, a deadly trifecta, Russians, Turks, and Syrians, now in charge of a region once protected by U.S. troops. Radical jihadists known as shock troops wreaking havoc in the area, and ISIS rising in the midst of the fray. Well, this unleashed a wave of terrorism right here at home. Chris Mitchell has this report from Jerusalem.
Syrian and Turkish troops displayed flags at what was the Kurdish headquarters just 2 weeks ago. CBN News has learned some experts on the region are concerned the people leading the self-administration government might be arrested, or that there could be retribution and revenge killings by the Assad regime for the people who just 2 weeks ago were the main U.S. allies in the region. But they say it could be averted if the U.S. stays in eastern Syria. On Capitol Hill, there's talk of war crimes by troops allied with Turkey during the invasion.
We would say that Turkish-supported Syrian opposition forces who were under general Turkish command in at least one instance did carry out a war crime, and we have reached out to Turkey to demand an explanation.
And if accurate, and I assume that they are accurate, they would be war crimes, as best as I know the law of land warfare.
At the White House, President Trump declared victory and lifted sanctions on Turkey.
This was an outcome created by us, the United States, and nobody else. No other nation. Very simple. And we're willing to take blame, and we're also willing to take credit.
The president also warned Turkey it needed to protect religious minorities, or he would reimpose sanctions. From inside northeast Syria, Christians issued a stark warning about Turkey.
Turkey is now conducting an ethnic and religious genocide against the people of northeastern Syria, in particular the Christians. Turkey is using the extremist terrorist groups to occupy the Syrian territories. Now in the region occupied by Turkey, all the Christians, Yazidis, and Kurds fled their homes, and only the radical jihadists are there.
Those extremist terrorist groups the Syriac Assyrian Christians blame are the Free Syrian Army that Turkey uses as their shock troops. It's a military unit some call ISIS 2.0.
The photographic evidence has emerged that some of the fighters have been positively identified as former ISIS people and former Al-Qaeda people who've just kind of, remustered, so to speak, into this new Turkish-supported formation. There's been evidence has emerged of the soldiers doing ISIS salutes. Some examples even of guys wearing patches and badges of ISIS. It's as clear-cut as that.
Meanwhile, the humanitarian crisis continues. Some of the hundreds of thousands of people forced to flee their homes have nowhere to go. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
It's shocking, ladies and gentlemen. It shocks the conscience to see what we've done. But it should have shocked the conscience when somebody, when Neville Chamberlain gave away Czechoslovakia and the Sudetenland and the Czech army, when he gave them away to the Nazis. And we've given away the Kurds And that whole part of Syria, we've given it away to the dictators, to Russia, to Turkey, and I suppose lesser degree to Assad. And we're looking at the Iranians coming in. It's a serious matter, ladies and gentlemen. But what are we talking about here at home? We're talking about a rump group in the United States House of Representatives that are refusing to allow appointed members of committees to sit in hearings. These hearings are being held as closed-door meetings, and Republicans who are legitimate members of the committees are being denied the access to those committees. So they are storming the doors, and they're shutting down for several hours. And the press is acting like, well, this is a delaying tactics by the Republicans. They absolutely deserve to be heard, and they're absolutely being closed out. And this is a shocking thing. And the more it comes about, it looks like that impeachment really is never going to gain steam. It's not going to happen. And as I said, if history bears out, Neville Chamberlain was reelected, and I would think the election, as far as Trump's go, it doesn't look like the Democrats are putting up any challenger that will take him down. John Jessup has more.
Pat, GOP lawmakers are accusing congressional Democrats of running a Soviet-style process and demanding the proceedings be brought out into the light. Jenna Browder has the latest on the escalating confrontation.
The impeachment investigation on Capitol Hill is reaching a boiling point after 24 GOP members stormed into a closed-door hearing demanding transparency. And now they're calling on the whistleblower to come forward and give public testimony.
By golly, if they're going to do it in public.
The stand-in forcing Intel Chair Adam Schiff to postpone the testimony. He and other House Democrats called it a stunt meant to distract.
So this is an effort to please the president, to try to shut down the process. It's a stunt.
President Trump has called on the GOP to be stronger in their defense. On Twitter, calling Republicans who oppose him human scum.
This is a Soviet-style impeachment process. This is closed doors. It is unfair in every way.
This is the Associated Press reports that shortly after Ukraine's president was elected and more than 2 months before his now controversial phone call with Trump, President Zelensky told a small group of advisors he was worried about pressure from Trump to investigate his political rivals. Hours after the storm-in, Congressman Jim Jordan kept up the pressure by calling for the whistleblower who filed the complaint over the phone call to come out of hiding and publicly testify. The GOP is also demanding the full House vote on impeachment. This would open up these hearings and also allow the White House in on the process. Senator Lindsey Graham, who first criticized the storm-in but later took back his comments, is expected to introduce a resolution condemning its closed-door handling. Feeling the pressure, House Democrats say they're preparing to move the investigation to a more public stage as soon as mid-November. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Pat, it's getting chaotic up there on the Hill.
Well, the deal is they don't want to have a vote. The Constitution makes it clear the House of Representatives shall initiate impeachment proceedings, but that's the full House. It's not Nancy Pelosi. It's not Adam Schiff. It's not one committee. It's not the rump of one committee. It is the whole House. And they refuse to take a vote because they do not wish to imperil some of their members. And the people who are up for re-election will find it very hard to justify voting for impeachment. So they don't want to have a vote. So in my opinion, this whole impeachment thing is going nowhere. And it will be very embarrassing to the Democrats, and they don't want it. But again, back to history. After Neville Chamberlain came back from Munich, he was reelected, and it was only later that they turned to Winston Churchill to rescue the country as the Nazis were mounting this enormous blitzkrieg all over Europe. So I don't think the president is going to get impeached. They don't have enough stuff to do it, and unless they move forward, without question, nobody in the White House should testify in front of these committees because it's just It's a kangaroo court, and they shouldn't be involved, and they're not going to be. So you've got a matter that's going to wind up in the courts probably, but that'll be way past the election. So what's this impeachment? It's not going to happen. And there's one thing that we talk about now on this news. I was so shocked when we saw that Parkland shooting and that deputy refused to go inside to see if he couldn't stop the shooting. It was a disgraceful thing. And the sheriff who was in charge of that has been fired. Now he's making a big appeal. So let's go to John for the details.
That's right, Pat. The Broward County Sheriff at the time of the Parkland school shooting is out of work today. The Florida Senate voted to remove Scott Israel from his position Wednesday. In January, Governor Ron DeSantis suspended Israel on charges of incompetence and neglect of duty. 2 mass shootings took place on his watch. In January 2017, 5 people died in an attack at the Fort Lauderdale airport. Just over a year later, a gunman killed 17 people, including students and teachers, at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland. And the father of one of the Parkland victims is on a mission to warn parents to find out about disciplinary procedures and safety measures in their children's schools. As Amber Strong reports, he believes that knowledge can help prevent more school massacres.
There has been a shooting at a high school in Parkland, north of Miami.
The resulting massacre sparked a movement.
Nothing has changed, and we need change now!
Leaving the nation wanting answers and action.
Like other parents who lost children that day, Andrew Pollock came to Washington demanding both. His daughter Meadow died while trying to save a fellow student.
How many schools, how many children have to get shot? I'm not going to sleep until it's fixed.
In his book, Why Meadow Died, Pollock says he hopes to fulfill that promise by unraveling a web of what he calls failures by the Broward County schools.
You have an incompetent monitor at the front gate. He says it. He goes, "I see crazy boy get out of the car with a rifle bag." All he had to do this is call code red. If the gates were shut, my daughter lives. What if, when the monitor called the other monitor in the school, if he would have just yelled, "Everyone, it's a lockdown," and went code red, but no, he went and hid in a closet.
And red flags existed even before the day of the shooting. Despite a laundry list of documented behavioral issues against the eventual killer, the school took little action.
He trespassed at the school. He could have been arrested. He threatened to shoot the school up. Should have been arrested.
Pollock's co-author and education expert Max Eden argues the lack of discipline, unfortunately, should come as no surprise.
In Broward County, they did a survey of all the teachers. 1,887 teachers were surveyed. They were asked, what would happen if a student assaults you? 3 teachers said the student would get arrested. 7 said the student would get a treat.
Eden maintains the policy at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School became the poster child for a federally led move away from suspensions and arrest.
They made it federal policy to basically tell school districts, if you have different rates of discipline by race or by disability, we will investigate you. And the goal was well-meaning, but the prescription was flawed.
Suspension rates dropped, but Eden contends the result was due to teachers and principals being afraid to take action, not a change in student behavior. While current Education Secretary Betsy DeVos rescinded the policy, one issue remains. Several government studies indicate racial and disability disparity is a problem, but Eden argues Washington alone can't solve it.
When it comes to basic classroom order, curbing bullying, preventing lower-level violence, I think that letting teachers make decisions that they think are prudent and just is the right way to go.
Like so many things here in Washington, it's complex with no real winners. But Pollock says parents can make a difference by knowing the policies inside their child's school and getting involved. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
Thank you, Amber. In Texas, state officials there are looking into the case of a father who's fighting to keep his 7-year-old son from transitioning to a girl. He sought sole custody of his son because his mother treats the boy as transgender and has received medical clearance to give him body-altering drugs. The Daily Wire reports court documents show the boy dresses as a girl and goes by the name Luna when he's with his mother. But witnesses for the father say he chooses boys' clothes and goes by his given name, James, when he's with him. A jury ruled against giving the father sole custody. Now Texas Governor Greg Abbott says the state attorney general and the Department of Family and Protective Services will look into the case. Well, in California, high winds and dry weather are creating fears of spreading wildfires. In Sonoma County, a wildfire sprang up overnight. 50-mile-an-hour winds fueling those flames. Fires threatened homes in Los Angeles earlier this week. These infrared images showing hot spots in danger of flaring up. For the second time in 2 weeks, utility companies are cutting off power to prevent downed power lines from starting more fires. And Pat, as many as 500,000 customers could be left in the dark.
Well, they think PG&E was responsible for some of those other fires, that the electrical currents were arcing and starting the fires. So PG&E is being sued for huge amounts of money, and they're not going to, they say, okay, we're shutting off power. So hundreds of thousands of homes will be without electricity. It's amazing what's happening. The weather in this country has just gone crazy. We've had massive tornadoes, massive wildfires. The Santa Ana winds are blowing out there. There's drought in one place, and there's incredible flooding in others. I mean, it's just amazing. So I don't know whether so-called climate change has anything to do with it, but whatever it is, this weather is not exactly benign, although where we live here, I would make a plug for Virginia Beach. It's just lovely all the time.
Pretty much.
Okay.